إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تبارك وتعالى خذ من أموالهم صدقة تطهرهم وتزكيهم بها وصل عليهم إن صلاتك سكن لهم والله سميع عليم صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد عدد ما ذكره الذاكرون وصل على سيدنا مولانا محمد عدد ما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون اللهم صل وسلم على عبدك ورسولك اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد أفضل صلوات. My respected brothers and sisters and honorable elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today is the 15th day of this blessed month of Sha'ban. That means we are less than 2 weeks away, or almost 2 weeks from the beginning of the blessed month of Ramadan. Last night was the night of the middle of Sha'ban, Laylatul Nisf min Sha'ban. And we had talked about the importance of the night of middle of Sha'ban in our previous Friday talk. So I will not repeat that, inshallah. May Allah accept our good deeds and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our mistakes. Since the month of Ramadan is just 2 weeks away, and during the month of Ramadan, most Muslims, they pay their annual zakah. Most Muslims wait for the month of Ramadan so they could pay their zakah that they had been waiting on. Although in principle zakah is not necessarily to be paid during the month of Ramadan. In fact, it should be paid on the day that the person is supposed to pay. So for instance, if I became Sahib al-Nisab, if I reach that threshold of money, that threshold of savings, which imposes upon me the obligation of zakah, then that day is the day that I must pay zakah. Once the year has passed. And not everyone reaches that threshold during the month of Ramadan. You could reach that threshold during the month of Sha'ban, during the month of Shawwal, during the month of Dhul Qa'dah, during the month of Dhul Hijjah, any other time of the year. However, most people wait for that. Wait for the month of Ramadan to give their zakah. And there could be a legitimate reason for that. And that is, during the month of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases the reward of all good deeds. And according to one hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the reward of all good deeds is increased good deed, a fard, is increased to 70 times. So by offering one fard, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the reward of 70 fara'id. So every single obligatory prayer that you offer during the month of Ramadan, Salatul Fajr, Salatul Dhuhr, Salatul Asr, Salatul Maghrib, Salatul Isha, the reward of each prayer is written in your book of deeds as 70, 70, 70. So multiply all the prayers that you offer, all the fara'id that you offer in the month of Ramadan by 70. Therefore, those who pay their zakah during the month of Ramadan, it is as if they paid their zakah 70 times. This is the amount of reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising for paying your zakah once during the month of Ramadan. And that is due to the blessing of Ramadan. You cannot get that in any other time of the year. It's important to clarify one thing at this point as well. When we talk about the rewards, yes, the rewards are promised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always fulfills His promise. However, it doesn't mean that if you are getting the reward of 70 prayers, that you don't have to do the next 69 prayers. Some people may misunderstand from these kind of ahadith that if you do one prayer in the month of Ramadan, you don't have to do the next 69 prayers. Likewise, when we learn from the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that if you do this, you will get the reward of Hajj. Some people may misunderstand from this, thinking that if I do this, then I don't have to go for Hajj anymore. And that's a complete and absolute misunderstanding. The obligation remains due until it is discharged. If you have to pray, you have to pray. Now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises to give you increased, multiplied rewards, then that's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the obligation will stand until it is discharged. So each prayer will become due as the time comes in. Each fasting will come due as the time comes in. And if someone has not made his fard Hajj, then they must go to Mecca, they must go to Mina, and they must go to Arafat, and they must go to Muzdalifah to perform their Hajj. They may be getting the reward of performing Hajj by even sitting in their home country, but that doesn't mean that their obligation of Hajj is being considered fulfilled and discharged as well. This is an important point to be clarified, so we don't misunderstand. Now, coming back to the point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases the reward of good deeds during the month of Ramadan, and therefore most people wait for the month of Ramadan to come so they could pay their zakah, in hope for getting more reward. And who doesn't want more bang for their buck? After all, everyone likes to have more value for what they give. So if we can get more value and more reward for the good deeds that we perform, then why not? We all want that, and we all would love to see that. And therefore the month of Ramadan is that time in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases the rewards of our good deeds. And in that respect, inshallah, I would like to say a few things about zakat today. Zakah is the second most important obligation in Islam. It is one of the most fundamental and basic pillars of the teachings of Islam. And in Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned the obligation of zakah next to the prayer, next to the salah, in nearly 33 places throughout the Quran. In most places, you will find the mentioning of zakah right after the mentioning of salah. وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. And establish prayer and give zakah. And zakah is one obligation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned a few details as well. Zakah, we find the ayat of Quran that talk about zakah that go back to the time of Meccan life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. For example, the final ayah of Surah Al-Muzammil, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَأَقْرِضُوا اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. And establish prayer and give zakah and give Allah a good loan. That ayah is part of Surah Al-Muzammil, and Surah Al-Muzammil was revealed before the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is a Makki surah, and this is a Makki ayah. So many ayah that talk about the obligation of zakah were given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam even before migration. However, the scholars teach us that the details of zakah were given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the obligation of zakah was enforced after the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he arrived and settled in Medina. So this is the reconciliation between the two kinds of verses and the two kinds of reports. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already ordained, had already commanded the obligation of zakah before the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the implementation of that and the enforcement of that came into existence after the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, once he had arrived in Medina and settled in Medina al-Munawwarah. Now, in regard to zakah, the basics, some of the basics that we should understand is that every individual, adults, men and women, once they meet a predetermined threshold of wealth, then they are required to pay zakah. When that determination is compared in gold and silver, we find clear guidance from the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in regard to gold and silver, we find clear instructions from the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that if you have this much gold, then you must pay zakah. And if you have this much silver, you must pay zakah. In gold, if you have almost 87 grams, then you must pay zakah. And in silver, if you have almost 612 grams, you must pay zakah. And zakah is only 2.5% of your wealth. Whatever you have, minus your obligations, minus your outstanding obligations. So if you have $100, you will have to pay $2.50 in zakah. If you have $200, you will have to pay $5 in zakah, and so on and so forth. So the amount that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to give in zakah is a very little amount. Those of you who are familiar with Christianity may also be familiar with the tithe, the ruling of tithe, which means that every practicing Christian who belongs to a church and who practices, who believes in the value of Christianity, must pay 10% of their earning, Not 10% of their savings, not 10% of their wealth, but 10% of their earning. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not even asking us half of that. Even half of half. 2.5% that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to give once a year in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the poor people, to the needy people. And do you even know how many poor people are in the world? What is the level of poverty? Not just around the world, not just in third world countries and in developing nations, but look at the level of poverty in our own country. Our country is probably the most prosperous nation on earth. But look at the level of poverty even in America. And then compare it to those countries where the level of poverty is staggering. And people don't even have one meal a day. Forget about having 2 meals or 3 meals or snacks and this and that. People don't even have one meal every single day. People in Gaza, people in Palestine, people in Syria, people in Central Republic of Africa, Central African Republic, people in Sudan, people in Burma, people in Afghanistan, people all around the world. They don't even have one meal. Their children cry for food, beg for food, but get nothing. If only we fulfill our obligation of zakah properly, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed us to do, it helps us to deal with the challenge of poverty. After all these people are our brothers and sisters. All of these people, regardless of their color, regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their religion, they are our brothers and sisters. And Allah has imposed that responsibility upon us, so we become the caretakers of others. If Allah has given you the means, you should know that it is Allah who has shown His favors upon you, who has showered His favors upon you. You did nothing to earn that. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Surah Al-Baqarah by saying, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, anfiqu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. O people, spend from that which we have given to you. Allah reminds us from time to time. Never forget the main point. Whatever you have is given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah wants to take it away at any point in your life, He can take it away in an instant. He does not need causes and reasons. He can take it away in an instant. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been very merciful and very kind to all of us. That He has given us enough that we can protect our dignity. We can protect our honor. And at the same time, we can help our brothers and sisters as well who are less fortunate and who don't have enough to even live by day or by night. I'll share with you one hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that is narrated in Sahih al-Muslim. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that once a man was standing in wilderness and he heard a sound, he heard a voice from the clouds. And what was the voice that he heard from the clouds? There was an announcement and there was a command in the cloud. And it was said, "Isqi hadiqata fulan." O cloud, go and irrigate the garden of so and so. So then he looked up and he did not see anyone who would be speaking. But he looks at the clouds and he observes the dispatching of a piece of cloud. A piece of cloud dispatches from there, moves on the side, and then it starts pouring rain on a stony ground. And then all of that rain goes into a channel. And through that channel, it starts moving in a certain direction. So this man was surprised. First of all, he was surprised to hear that kind of command. And then he realized it must be something special. And I must investigate. I must find out what's going on. So he followed that channel. He followed the water where it was going until he reached a place where he sees a man who has a hatchet in his hand and he is guiding the water into his garden. So he stops over there and he asks, "Masmuka ya Abdullah?" O servant of Allah, what is your name? So this man, he says, "Oh, my name is so and so." And he quickly remembers that this is the same name that was mentioned in the clouds. He heard the same exact name. So the man who was guiding the water into his garden, he said, why would you ask my name? I don't know you, you're a stranger. And then he explained. He said, I was standing on the other side, and I heard the clouds. I heard a voice in the clouds that said, "Isqi hadiqata fulan." Go and irrigate the garden of so and so. And the name that was mentioned was your name. So I became curious and I followed the channel. I followed the water flow to find out where does this water go. And it led me to you. And then I asked you, and you confirmed that is your name. And this is the name that I heard in the clouds. So then he said, I give you the name of Allah. Please tell me, what is the special thing that you do for which Allah has shown you favor in this manner? And this is an authentic hadith, an authentic incident that Rasulullah ﷺ has shared with us. It's not a fiction. It's a real story. So he said, I don't normally share what I do between me and my Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But since you asked, I will tell you what I do. He said, I don't do anything special. But whatever produce I get from my garden, I divide it into 3 shares. I give 1 share to the poor and needy for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I keep 1 share for my needs and my family's needs. And the last share, I put it back into the ground, reinvest. So I can have the crop next year as well, in the next season as well. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed this man. Because he was doing what pleased Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all, we all should know and we all should understand that whatever we have in our possession is given to us by the Almighty, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when Allah gives wealth to people, He expects them to be responsible in spending of that wealth as well. And one of the obligations of that is to look after those who don't have it. And now the month of Ramadan, inshallah, is coming. In the month of Ramadan, in one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said is the month of sympathy. To show care to those who have less than you. To share with those who have less than you. So Allah will bless you and Allah will have mercy upon them as well. When you give sadaqah, when you give zakah from your wealth, know that this is the promise of Allah. مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. No spending in the path of Allah ever reduces the wealth that you have. Your wealth will never be reduced by the money that you give, that you spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The zakah that you spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, the zakah purifies your wealth. This is the whole meaning of zakah. Zakah, yuzakki, in Arabic means to purify something. So when you give the zakah away from the wealth that Allah has given to you, the rest of the wealth that you have, now it's poor. If you did not give zakah, the whole wealth becomes polluted. And in one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, sometimes the money that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wealth that must be given away in zakah, if it's not given away, sometimes it destroys the other wealth as well. It's contagious. It infects the other wealth as well, and the other wealth is doomed as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to practice upon Sunnah Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. I'll share one thing personal with you, and it's interesting. When I was preparing for a khutbah today, first I didn't know what should I talk about today. We talked about Sha'ban, we talked about the important night of the middle of Sha'ban, and now the month of Ramadan is still 2 weeks away, so next week I was planning I'll talk about this inshallah, and the week after I'll talk about this. But today I was kind of confused. I said, what should I talk about today? And then, without even realizing, I was led to talk about zakah. And I said it made sense, alhamdulillah, but I still didn't get the point why I'm talking about that. And then as I was preparing to come inside the masjid to give khutbah, this brother came to me. And he had talked to me last week as well. And he had talked to me about a flood in Bosnia, where many homes have been washed away, many people have lost homes, many people are in need of help, our own Muslim brothers and sisters. And he had asked me that next week, inshallah, if you can make the announcement, so whoever wants to donate something, whoever wants to help, he will have a box there and he will collect it and send it direct to Bosnia, inshallah. He is from Bosnia as well. And when he came to my office, I realized this is what led to this talk. I didn't even realize why this talk was being prepared. And then when he came into my office, the paper was still on my desk, and I looked at it, I said, subhanallah, it all connects now. The talk and the cause and the purpose and the flooding in Bosnia. So, I would like to make this announcement, inshallah, and make a request to you for this flooding in Bosnia. It happened probably a few weeks ago, but it was a severe flooding, and we did not hear about it in the news. We did not hear it because that part of the world is basically cut off from the news media. So there are many brothers and sisters who have lost their homes, who have no shelter, and they are in need of urgent help, inshallah. And there are over 100,000 buildings and homes that are no longer considered habitable because of these floodings. So those people are in need of your help and my help, inshallah, and consider that as an opportunity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and donate whatever you can to help these brothers and sisters in Bosnia, inshallah. Imagine your money, you earned it here, you made it here, and now you're sending a portion of that to your brothers and sisters in Bosnia that you don't even know, but you're doing it only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you know Allah, and Allah knows you. Even though you don't know those people to whom you're sending your help, but you know Allah and Allah knows you, and Allah will never forget you. So I would like to make this appeal to you, inshallah. You'll see this flyer over there as well, but this brother, he will have the box after the prayer, after the salah, and donate whatever you can to help these brothers and sisters in Bosnia, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon all our brothers and sisters all around the world, in Syria, in Gaza, in Palestine, in Africa, in Burma, and all around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala improve their conditions and their safety. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah. Allah